onlookers to the absence of evidence prosecutors faced. But as any of you know who have reported or tried to follow preparations for a trial, neither side generally wants to talk. The trials were set for early 1994. In the months after the arrests, prosecuting attorney John Fogelman launched an unusual and unannounced prosecutor's investigation in search of evidence to support Ms. Kelly's statements. He had no murder weapon, no indication that the accused knew the victims. He had and no evidence from the scene where the bodies were found that linked any of the accused to the crime. Fogelman personally questioned dozens of people, and again, as in Salem, most were children and teenagers. In October 1993, with the trials just a few months away, Fogelman had divers search a small lake behind the trailer park where Baldwin lived. That search produced a knife. Fogelman would later suggest in court that the knife had been used on the victims, though no forensic evidence supported that claim. Years later, when I was writing my book, Fogelman told me that the search of the lake was kept secret. No one had known about it but the divers, the police, and himself. However, the fact was that even that event had been manipulated. In searching the records of the West Memphis Evening Times, I found a front-page story about the search, complete with a photo of the diver, mask on, still in the water, clearly holding a serrated knife. Ms. Kelly was tried first. He had recanted his statement to police soon after his arrest, but that made no legal difference. Because Eccles and Baldwin both maintained they were innocent, Ms. Kelly could not be tried with them. The state Supreme Court would later acknowledge that the recording of Ms. Kelly's statement to police constituted all the evidence against him. Judge Dan Stidham, who is here tonight, can tell you more about the trial where he served as Ms. Kelly's attorney. But a crucial part of that trial for me came when Stidham asked an officer to explain the errors and inconsistencies in Ms. Kelly's confession. The officer replied, "Jesse just got confused." The jurors accepted that. And though the prosecutors asked for the death sentence for Ms. Kelly, they came back with a sentence of life in prison. After the trial, Judge David Burnett complimented the news media, noting that he was, quote, well pleased with the way they had covered the trial. Stidham announced that he would appeal, and the prosecutors dropped the word to reporters that Ms. Kelly's life sentence might not be exactly final. Noting that Damian and Jason's trial was just 18 days away, they explained that Jesse's sentence would not become final for about 4 months. During that time, if Judge David Burnett chose, he could reduce Ms. Kelly's sentence. They explained that such a thing might happen if, for instance, Ms. Kelly agreed to testify against Eccles and Baldwin at their upcoming trial. Despite the offer of a reduced sentence, Ms. Kelly refused to repeat his claim that he had seen Eccles and Baldwin murder the boys. A similar offer of a term of years rather than the death penalty was made to Baldwin. The 16-year-old also refused, not once but twice, prosecutor's office offers of a reduced sentence. If he would testify that Eccles had done the killing. So think about it. Jason Baldwin is 16 years old. He's been in jail for months, and he's about to enter a trial where the prosecutors are going to ask for the death sentence. He's offered two deals in secret. He tells the prosecutors, no, that would be a lie. My mother raised me better than that. As I see it, there's some monumental integrity shown here, and it is not on the part of the prosecutors. Reporters and the public, of course, knew nothing about the offers to both Ms. Kelly and Baldwin. Offers that could have gotten them out of prison by now had they accepted them. Nor did anyone know the reason those offers were made. the prosecutors had a problem. They could not play the tape of Miss Kelly's statement at the second trial. Even as they prepared to seek the death penalty for Eccles and Baldwin, they knew that without some corroborating testimony, they had virtually no evidence against the two. But as the trial for Eccles and Baldwin began, all the public knew was that Miss Kelly had accused Eccles and Baldwin, and Miss Kelly had just been found guilty. Now, yet another door of secrecy was about to come between the proceedings in a courtroom and the public's right to know. Judge David Burnett was having trouble seating a jury because so many prospective jurors said that they could not be impartial. Noting that some of them said that they were afraid, Burnett told reporters that as jurors were selected, their names would be made public, but he asked that they not be published. Because of the magnitude of this case, he went on, some are fearful that it could affect their business. One or two have asked to remain anonymous. Partly because of those concerns, Burnett further explained that he was taking the unusual step of having prospective jurors questioned privately in his chambers rather than in open court. I am sorry to say that no newspaper in Arkansas protested, but the commercial appeal did. Lawyers for the commercial appeal cited Arkansas law, which they argued provided for all trials and hearings to be public. But the prosecutors and the attorney for Baldwin argued for keeping the voir dire closed. Baldwin's attorney argued that we are far more likely to get a fair jury, which is what we're after, in private. Judge Burnett agreed and carried on with the trial. The commercial appeal took the issue to the Arkansas Supreme Court, which scheduled an emergency session for the following Monday morning. But by then, a jury of 8 women and 4 men had been impaneled in Jonesboro. Days later, the Arkansas Supreme Court ruled that Burnett's questioning of prospective jurors in private had been in error. The court said state law strictly limited the discretion of judges to close jury selection. It wrote, members of the public have a right to hear the voir dire examination of individual jurors. Cases have been reversed in this court because of answers given by prospective jurors, which subsequent investigation established were false or at least incorrect. But coming when it did, the decision had no impact on the trial that was already underway in Jonesboro. The improperly impaneled jury remained seated and the trial continued. Nor did the block on open records and proceedings end there. Now that Ms. Kelly stood convicted, the commercial appeal also filed a Freedom of Information request seeking access to the investigative police file that police had compiled in his case. Arkansas law requires the release of police investigative files once a case is closed, a point that is clearly marked when a defendant is sentenced. But Burnett denied that request too. He said that even though the cases of Eccles and Baldwin had to be legally separated from Ms. Kelly's, the files of all 3 defendants were combined. He said the right of a fair trial supersedes the right for the press to have access. As the Eccles-Baldwin trial then progressed and its lack of evidence grew more apparent, the prosecutors chose a strategy whose possible success rested entirely on the earlier media attention. Attention on cults, the occult, and Satanism. Lacking Ms. Kelly's statement and anything else of substance, they attempted to establish a motive for the slayings, a motive of cult activity. They called a technician from the state crime lab who testified that she had found a trace of blue wax on one of the victim's shirts. Other witnesses said a book titled Never on a Broomstick was found in Eccles' home, and 11 black t-shirts in Baldwin's. And then the prosecutor's star witness, a self-proclaimed expert in the occult, who we now know claimed a fraudulent PhD, took the stand. Fogelman asked him if he could describe the appearance of young people involved in the occult. The witness testified, I have personally observed people wearing black fingernails, having their hair painted black, wearing black t-shirts,